Classification note: the contents of this journal are fictionalized reconstructions. No verified correlation with real individuals or incidents has been established. Transcription note: Metropolitan Evidence Archive, filed 3 years after final case entry. The following materials were recovered in 3 separate notebooks found across different sites associated with the Maris investigation. Each has been preserved and transcribed to maintain sequence and internal coherence. Original handwriting suggests the same author, though ink analysis varies by composition and era. Editorial insertions, e.g. missing pages, photocopy marks, or illegible fragments, have been indicated in brackets. No further commentary has been provided. Journal 1, Catalog Number PR731A, Entry 1. The first time I realized I could take life without consequence, I was 12. A jay had broken its wing against my father's shed, a bright thing gasping in the wet grass. The adults were still inside arguing about bills and promises. I knelt, placed my thumb behind the hinge of the skull, and pressed until the sound stopped. It was not horror, it was instruction. Silence arrived like a temperature, cool, corrective, absolute. The world before that sound and the world after were not the same shape. A lesser imagination might call it guilt. I called it information. I had discovered a pressure point in reality, the precise degree at which motion ceases to signify life. I remember thinking, so little force to rearrange what people swear is sacred. After that, I looked for repetition. Not for cruelty, but for certainty. I found it in frogs, then in the stray cats that wandered the alley like unsupervised secrets. My father taught me tools. My mother taught me cleanliness. Between them, they built the perfect laboratory for a mind that valued order over sentiment. When the first human came much later, there was no transition, only scale. I did not feel the boundary cross. That is the nature of thresholds. You never know you've stepped over one until you are too far to retreat. I tell you this because beginnings are misunderstood. They do not burst, they fade in like a light someone forgot to switch off. That moment in the yard was mine. The silence I created has followed me faithfully ever since. It asks for nothing but repetition. It rewards precision. It punishes waste. The yard itself was small, an unambitious square behind our house where grass grew unevenly, and where my father's tool shed leaned with a carpenter's limp. I remember the smell of iron, rust and rain mixed into something patient. The bird had crashed into the window an hour before. My mother had called it a poor thing, the same phrase she used for news about strangers. The phrase was meant to end a tension, not extend it. She had closed the curtain, resumed her argument. The jay, though, had refused her indifference. It twitched under the sky, a wind-up toy that didn't understand the winding was done. I studied it the way I would later study everything, by pattern. How many breaths between spasms? How many seconds before exhaustion overtakes instinct? I counted. 4 in, 4 out. The number felt even, reasonable. Years later, I would realize I never stopped counting in 4s. When I pressed my thumb, it wasn't rage or curiosity. It was completion. The moment felt like cleaning something that had been left unfinished. The sound that followed wasn't gruesome. It was symmetrical. The world went still, and the stillness didn't accuse me. It accepted me. My father's voice carried through the window, the sharp punctuation of a man who believed order was love. His lessons were sermons in control. Tighten until it holds, not until it breaks. He said it about bolts, but it applied to everything. My mother's lessons came in solvents and silence. Her way of healing was removal. Between them, they built an unintentional doctrine. One constructed, the other erased. I only perfected what they began. After that day, I tested the silence like an instrument. I found frogs first, the small slick ones that hid in the gutter after storms. I wanted to see if the hush after their stillness matched the jays. It did, almost. But the silence of a small life has a higher pitch. It doesn't resonate long. The cats were better. They had a certain dignity, and their deaths sounded lower, rounder, like closing a lid on a box. I was refining technique without realizing it. Each act was a calibration. I began keeping notes, not written, but remembered. The length of struggle, the softness of surrender, the exact shade of air afterward. I noticed that the world seemed relieved after precision, as though chaos had been corrected. The wind resumed evenly. The insects dared again to speak. Silence wasn't absence. It was a system resetting itself. Sometimes I imagine the silence as a companion, something older than language, patient and unjudging. It did not whisper, it did not comfort, it waited. Each repetition drew it closer until I began to recognize its tone beneath other noises, in the hum of streetlights, the cooling sigh of my father's truck, the mechanical rhythm of my mother's washing machine. The silence was not a void. It was a structure that contained me. At school, they praised empathy as though it were the apex of civilization. But empathy is often noise, people mistaking the echo of their own fear for compassion. What they called kindness, I recognized as performance. When the teacher made us bury a class pet, a hamster that had died of neglect, the others cried in the key they thought appropriate. I remember watching the dirt fall and thinking the act was wrong because it was imprecise. The hole was uneven. The gesture exaggerated. I wanted to smooth it. I wanted to measure it. It is easy later to mythologize the first human, to imagine an initiation, a breaking point. There was none. There was only continuity, one pattern extending naturally into another. The body, whether feathered or breathing language, behaves by the same physics. There is no moral event in stillness, only biology surrendering to arithmetic. I sometimes revisit that shed in memory, not to atone but to re-examine the geometry of its walls. My father hung a level above the workbench, a glass tube holding a bubble of equilibrium. He would tap it until the bubble centered between its lines. Even as a child, I knew that what fascinated me wasn't the balance, but the idea that one could see balance quantified. That same principle guided my hands the first time I pressed against the pulse of another throat. If I have a ritual, it is one of cleanliness. Afterward, always afterward, I wash my hands longer than required. The water cools from warm to neutral, and I stop only when the temperature matches the silence inside me. I align the towels. I count the breaths. 4 in, 4 out. It is not superstition. It is calibration. Beginnings are not loud. They are accumulations of quiet agreements between intent and opportunity. No trumpet announced mine. Only the simple arithmetic of necessity and the knowledge that the world, if pressed correctly, folds without complaint. Sometimes I wonder if the bird would have died without my help. Probability says yes, but probability is a coward's comfort. Certainty is what the hand provides when the world hesitates. I removed hesitation. That was mercy of a kind. The silence has never betrayed me. It has never asked why. Those who have never met it mistake it for emptiness. They cannot hear its texture, the faint static between breaths, the pulse of the earth adjusting to subtraction. It speaks softly, but always in complete sentences. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear it. It is not memory, it is presence. The soft internal hush that isn't absence, but obedience. It waits in the base of the skull, under the ribs, between the seconds of heartbeat. The silence still loves me. I only ever wanted to love it back.